In video number 1, we talked about how to train and how to perfect the basic blows. And in the beginning, the techniques have to be done slowly, and you have to perfect your patterns in the actions, whatever those actions are. Use of a full-length mirror can be extremely helpful as you look at your image in the mirror as you're doing the technique. And you can get feedback of how to do the technique. Well, once the technique has been worked enough, the pattern is down, now it's time to take the training to the next level, which is to add visualization. This is really, really important. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity. And what this simply means is that your brain has the ability to map new neural networks, an infinite amount of them. And one of the problems is we're not mapping new networks. We're constantly thinking the same old worn out thoughts over and over. I think of it like I have a property, big dirt property, and you got to make your own roads and drive on them. And they're in the middle of nowhere. And when you drive on them at first, the road is real faint. But after you drive it long enough, that road is worn in there. And just in the same way, when you don't drive on that road goes away. And that's for another video when we talk about some of the limited thoughts people will have in regard to self-defense and how that will hold them back and creating those new neural patterns. But it's critically important in the practice of the technique. So let's talk about how to do that. You're going to practice the technique solo. And I want to address this a little later in the video about working with a partner and visualizing. But here I am solo by myself, which is the way I train all the time. And I imagine the enemy in front of me. Now, imagine a real person in front of you. Don't just make it the idea of, oh, there's a person in front of me here. Picture an actual person. You could take somebody out of a movie scene. It will make it more real. When we can attach an image and a picture to a thought, or certainly a technique, it makes it more memorable, it burns it in deeper and faster and more complete. So you could picture somebody out of your past, and I'm going to address that a little later too, because that can get pretty intense. Maybe you've been attacked in the past and you can see that guy attacking you now. But let's get on to that in a little bit. So I'm going to picture an actual person. Here's another trick I use for that. Sometimes I'm out and about in town and I just see a guy that looks rough. I imagine to myself, man, imagine if that guy attacked me. Well, when I come back to the dojo here, I imagine that guy attacks me. I see him in my mind's eye, and here's the next thing. Imagine the trigger. What is he doing that causes you to attack him? So I'll take this guy that maybe I've seen, he looks rough, and I come back and I get relaxed ready and I imagine the guy in front of me. But I'm going to imagine that he approaches me and he starts to threaten me. And then he raises his fist to punch me. I'm going to even imagine it further. He raises his right fist to punch me. So here I am, visualizing. I might even add some verbal comments like, please sir, you're scaring me, stay back. And then he comes in. I do the side kick. I start again. It's replaying the beginning. Here he comes. I see his fist come up, the trigger. I kick him in the knee. Do it again. Here he comes. His fist comes up. I kick his knee. I might work the chin jab in the same way, over the same technique, or with the same trigger rather. Although I do like the side kick for a punch coming at me, so I work the side kick with that trigger quite a bit. But you can picture any trigger as long as your response makes sense for it. So a guy that came up and threatened in a certain way, if I didn't feel it was a deadly threat, which is a hard thing to determine, I might not imagine something not very aggressive, me chopping his throat. So let's say I'm going to visualize chopping a guy across the throat, a serious thing to do to somebody, like shooting him with a gun, pretty serious. So I might imagine as the trigger The thing I see him doing that triggers me to attack, him reaching for a weapon. This is a very important trigger to wire your reaction in, to burn in that new neural pattern with the technique here. So again, he's threatening and he's out of arm's reach, but he's right there where I can get to him if I need to, because I don't want him too far away. And I see him reach for the knife, the trigger. I come in with the chop. Notice at this point, I'm just working basic strikes. And I do this a lot, just a single strike. And in a moment, we're going to add follow-up, because we need to add follow-up, and we need to see ourselves following up. But that first initial blow off of the trigger is really important. It gets you started. It's like, I can remember playing football. No matter how many games I was in, when it was kickoff time, I was so nervous. And then when you butted heads at the other end, everything loosened up. Or a wrestling match, same thing. Or to this day, giving a public talk, a little nervous at first, and then you get out there and you get going. You flow from there. It's the same thing in an attack. The most important thing is that you act immediately in an offensive way against this attacker as soon as you see that trigger come from him. I've talked about two triggers here. A guy raising his fist up to punch you. So you're visualizing this and you throw the side kick. And you're visualizing it again and you throw the side kick. And we're getting that opening movement down. So we're going to visualize something specific. I would recommend you start with those two things right there. We'll add some more triggers here in a moment. There are some hardcore triggers, I would say, that would absolutely cause you to attack. And then there are triggers that are circumstance specific. You would have to be there, and feel what you felt. But certainly under any circumstances, a guy walks up, starts to threaten you, and he reaches for his gun or his knife. This ought to trigger you into the most vicious retaliatory force you could put on him. So that's a good trigger. So again, I imagine him going for the gun. I'm aware of his hands as we're talking. I might even maneuver a little bit, but let's get a little more advanced if you're a beginner. I might back up and pivot and look, sir, I don't want any trouble. I'm going to go to an eye stab. An eye stab. But I pictured the trigger. Look, you could sit here all day long and do an eye stab. And I'm thinking about eating pizza later today. Or I'm thinking about how to do an eye stab. That's okay when you're perfecting the eye stab and working on the basic blow. But once you want to program it now, you need to take it a step further and visualize. No more thinking about the technique. And this is one of the reasons why Professor Steiner and myself, when we teach a group class and lead a group class, we do not make corrections of students in a group class. I will almost never do it. Sometimes if the student is making a mistake that's so horrendous that I want that pattern to stop, I'll kind of walk by and correct them, but it's a rare thing because I want them to act immediately and not think, am I doing the technique perfectly? Is sensei going to come over and say, put more of your hip into the kick? So I'm not going to correct that stuff. And it's not unusual to have somebody watch the class and say to me later, your students weren't doing this right or that right, and I'm well aware of how my students were performing. You can't be critical of students all the time and expect them to react immediately to this emergency. You can correct that thing later. So when we're visualizing, we don't worry about form. But see, that's the problem too if you have not perfected the blow first. Let's take the chin jab, for example. The chin jab without practice, I'm going to do it at this angle as if the assailant were here, and of course he'd be in close, is an upward blow. Smashes up and under the chin. It's unusual. It's an unusual motion to take. Well, if you haven't perfected it and you really start to put visualization in here and you start to work up a little intensity, it'll turn into a palm heel strike, or your hand will just flail out there. And the technique will need to be worked on before you're able to add the visualization to the technique. Let's add follow-up to the visualization. And let's go to the side kick leads that are in this package. There's the side kick chin jab attack combination and the side kick double hand axe. This working of visualization is so important. And it's such a wonderful thing, and it takes time. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it takes a little time, and it's a constant thing, and eventually you can just live through all these circumstances that you want to defend against and see yourself successfully defending. Let's start with the side kick chin jab. I see that adversary in front of me. I'm in mental condition orange in this case. Remember, orange is anticipating. He's done something to cause me to believe he's going to attack. So at this point, I don't feel justified with that totally preemptive kind of timing where I'm just going to attack him right away because I'm not sure what he's going to do. So I'm going to wait to see if he makes a bona fide move, and I'm going to attack the moment he attacks. It's a great timing with the guy in the street. He didn't expect it. So he raises that fist up. I'm going to side kick chin jab on the guy. I'm going to come back and practice it again. I set up, I see him. Up comes his fist. Side kick chin jab on the guy. I change sides. I work it from the other side. I might maneuver a little bit with him. Side kick chin jab on the guy. Side kick chin jab on the guy. Now, I might visualize the guy head on to me, and I side kick, and I see his head come forward, and I come straight up under the chin with the chin jab. But I might see side kick, it twists him in a way, I'm going to become the attacker now, and he's like this. Well, in that case, I am going to use more of a straight palm heel and come in and smash him in the temple. I can see it. I see it in my mind's eye. Maybe his right foot is forward right now. He's like this. I can see him in my mind's eye. He's facing that way, my imaginary guy. And I can already see that the chin jab is not going to be set up for his chin that's going to fall that way. I can visualize the guy in front of me. And, I don't know, this time I'm going to visualize his hand has a knife in it in the rear. Well, I kick the knee and bash him with the palm heel. I picture the attack happening. Here's another thing about visualizing. Visualize success. It's your imagination. You can take it anywhere you want. So, see the enemy coming at me, and I deliver a side kick, crack, smash right into him with a straight palm heel. I see the enemy coming. He raises his fist. I see it in my mind's eye. I side kick, chin jab. He was in the perfect position for the chin jab blow. And remember, work both sides, left side and right side, and see that enemy in front of you and visualize success. Now, sometimes I'll always visualize success, not sometimes, but sometimes when I'm visualizing success, I'll visualize it not going so perfectly well, like my teeth have been knocked out. I can imagine that. Maybe not perfectly, but I imagine as I do the side kick chin jab, you know, bam, I've been hit in the face, and bam, get into the combination. You know, I imagine it doesn't start out so good. Maybe get taken by surprise, which we don't want to do, but maybe it's happened. And you suddenly react violently, or you come in with the side kick, and it doesn't land. I don't visualize that too much because I don't like to visualize that kind of thing, but I visualize it once in a while. The kick missed. I come in with the chin jab. Didn't look any different to you, but in my mind's eye, I saw the kick miss. And notice as the kick missed, it didn't change me going into that chin jab combination. I'm going to work the side kick double hand axe. The process is going to be the same. Doesn't matter whether I've taken a basic or one of the attack combinations. So the side kick double hand axe. I really love this combination against a fist fighter. Now remember, when this guy's coming at us, we know nothing about him. Is he good with his fist or not good with his fist? We don't know. I'm going to go ahead and assume that he is. Does he have a weapon or not have a weapon? I don't really know. I'm going to go ahead and assume he does too. I'm going to wait to act upon that it's confirmed, but I'm not going to make any assumptions that this situation is going to be easy. So if I'm assuming this guy, which I am, might be good with his fist, I'm surely not going to let him get within arm's reach of me like this and we're just standing here, nothing's happening. I want to take a step back from this individual at this point, and then he's going to have to step. I visualize this trigger a lot, personally, only because it's a common form of attack, is it not? Guy comes up, threatens, and he throws a punch at you. And maybe he throws it pretty decently. And maybe he just comes in and swings wildly. It doesn't matter when it comes to an attack combination. That triggered you to attack him. So, I'm in a left side lead. I'm going to imagine the assailant. I can see him in my mind's eye. I can picture the face on the guy I'm fighting right now. And he's facing the opposite way. He's in a left side lead. And as I kick him, he starts to double over. And that initial hand X comes to the back of the neck, and then the last one down. Just like in the video that's attached on the side kick double hand X, I talk about that. But now we're intensely visualizing. And I come after the guy. Man, this guy's gonna punch me. Here he comes. Fear is flowing. I visualize that too. How do I visualize that? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is imagine something that emotionally charges you a bit. Now, we need to be careful with this. If you've been attacked in the past, it can be a really powerful thing to fight that individual again. The person who beat you severely and put you into this state of mind you're in. Well, fight him again. And this time it's going to go different. Well, think of, if you think about, if you've been in this situation, and I've been in it, I've been assaulted horribly. When you've been in that situation and you go back and think about it, man, you start to get emotional. Start to shake a little bit. That's what visualization does. Well, think about too, I visualize something pleasurable. I start to get this smile, because I'm thinking about the thing and I'm feeling it. And this is making for a really powerful, charged up situation to ingrain the technique into those neural patterns. Remember that neuroplasticity. So here I am. Let's say a guy had approached you in the past and he beat the heck out of you with his fist. And he just pummeled you and you didn't react at all, and you just had no courage, and you handled it horribly, and you feel about this big now, and well, fight him again in your mind. And this time, there's no holding back. There's no not reacting. You realize it's going to take way more courage to do nothing and everything that happens after that than to act right now and let the chips fall where they may. So here comes that. I picture the guy. Let's say if this happened, it wasn't my circumstance where I got pummeled by fist. I got thrown to the ground and stomped on. I want to cover that in the grappling video, though, by the way, and I'll talk more about that incident that happened. But here's this guy that punched me out, and look, I don't want any trouble. And up comes this fist, and this time a rage comes out of you. Bam! And smash and smash! And you go after this guy. And then you do it again and again. Now, a couple things about that. One, even as I do it right now and I'm kind of demonstrating it, I'm feeling it a little bit. There's only so much of that kind of high intensity visualization you can do. Nobody could run through a class and do that the whole class. And actually, I've had students do it that have just recently been through something, and I've got them to the right point, and it's okay, boy, I mean, they're at this high intensity path, and now you're on your own doing this, I'm assuming. You're training solo like I do here, and let's say you're visualizing something, and let's take an anxiety scale of 1 to 10. If that anxiety starts to get up into, I don't know, certainly 7, 8, stop. Don't do this anymore. This is not good for you, or you just feel you can't handle this yet. Then work your techniques as you can, and don't do this super high intensity that I'm talking about. But if you can bring your anxiety level up a little bit, 2 or 3, which is a little more normal. I can think of the incident I alluded to earlier, and I still bring anxiety up about it, you know, about what happened, and get myself in that state. Now, this brings me back to visualizing an actual individual. This can be extremely useful. You have an interaction with somebody and it doesn't go well, but it doesn't become physical, which I hope is rare. But let's say it's happened. You had an interaction with a guy somewhere, and he was threatening, and it looked like it might happen, and you were charged up and ready to go, and it didn't happen. Well, boy, when you come back to your training facility, your garage, your living room, wherever you train, fighting. Imagine a different happening, though, that the guy did in fact attack, because it's still charged up with you. You know, who hasn't had an incident, or if you have had an incident like that you're not charged up for a long time. You know, sometimes it's half the day later, you're still, you know, stewing about it. Well, go train. And the thing too, when you picture your trigger, make it something very legitimate. Remember that what really happened with you, the guy never attacked you. But in your training mind, imagine he went for his knife. He started to pull a knife out. So you drilled him right in the throat. That'd be a great time to practice the chop, punch, knee. I imagine he goes for his knife, chop, punch, knee attack. I set up again, chop, punch, knee attack. I visualize it. Chop, punch, knee attack. Chop the back of his neck. You're living through it. This, people, is critical, what I'm talking about. And it's the reason why you can burn in these neural patterns without sparring. Now, a thought about that. When a man spars in full contact sparring, he will definitely build neural patterns real deep, because there is tremendous emotion associated with it. If you've ever full contact sparred, it's frightening. You realize the other guy's trying to knock you out, you know, so it's a pretty charged up event. And the thing is, you're going to start developing patterns of, let's say, on the ground grappling skills. And like I said, I want to talk about my incident more on the grappling part, because I was a grappler. And I ended up on the ground with a guy, and I never took his eyes out, and I never bit him, and those instincts weren't in me. But so sometimes when you're full out sparring, you're going to develop one thing well. One thing you'll learn about yourself is you have the ability to get hit and to hit back and to get in there and do it, but you're going to build some really horrible patterns. Patterns that you do not want for combat. The battle should be quick, and the battle should be over. So when you're visualizing, especially if you can do this high charged, high intensity visualization, that's how you're going to bring fear into the formula. When fear starts to come over you, you want to realize this is a positive thing. You can do this through visualizing. You could do it in other parts of your life too. You know, when you have anxiety in the day, it doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad. Sometimes it's moving you to do something or get into action in some way. But if we can get ourselves just a little bit fearful, so on that 0 to 10 scale of anxiety about it, look, we don't need to be building a 7 or an 8, something like that. You're not ready to do this yet if you've had that experience. And you need help, with somebody professionally to help you with that, with counseling. But boy, if we can bring the anxiety up to 2 or 3 or something and train, that's powerful. And you can do that for a pretty long time. Another way to use visualization. This was something I've always been able to do, and it was one of the reasons that when I was coming up through the ranks with Professor Steiner, I've learned things really quickly, and probably for a number of reasons, but one was visualization. Now this is a whole other thing here. You can visualize doing the technique. So in the counterattacks, I think this is really important because they're a little more complicated. But let's say you're working the sequence for a rear bear hug as we teach it, and it's got a number of moves where you drop your weight suddenly and back kick and headbutt, and then there's a lateral movement with a hammer fist, and go to the counter on the bear hug, you see what I'm talking about. But you don't have to wait to have a partner to practice it, and you don't even have to be in the training studio. And this way you got no dead time. No, don't do it driving a car. You need to pay attention when you're driving, but let's say you had to wait somewhere and you were sitting and you're sitting in the doctor's office in the waiting room. Well, you gotta do something with your time. You wanna read some mindless magazine in there? How about sit there and go through your counterattack technique for the rear bear hug over the arm? So now I'm not talking about visualizing the attack, because we could do that from a chair too. But what I'm talking about is you're just simply going through the mechanics. See yourself dropping, going up, moving to the left, and visualizing the technique. So whenever Professor Steiner taught me anything, and I've learned how unusual this is, I've had a few students like this, but very few. When I came back to him for the next lesson, I always had it totally memorized. I had the technique down, but I didn't have it down enough. It wasn't practiced or anything. But that phase of it I always had down. And I'll be honest with you, I always had it down solid because I wanted him to teach me the next thing. And he didn't, though, as you know, I've learned too as a teacher. Just because the guy got the technique down and he's got it memorized, he still needs some time with it now. Show me a few hundred reps, and in those days it was literally a few thousand reps. You know, some of the belt ranks I had coming up, I held for 2 years. You know, I had one belt to the next, and that's being at the school every single day and practicing. But using visualization to memorize the technique is a very good way to use visualization. You know, the most important way, though, of course, what we were talking about, using the technique. You see the attacker there. Look, I don't want any trouble. You're playing the part of the defender, and you can play different parts too. You can play the excessively fearful guy. Look, I'm so sorry, and then suddenly kick the guy in the testicles and bash his brains in. And you could visualize yourself taking a little stronger position of, you know, please leave me alone. I don't want any trouble. That would be my idea of a stronger position. I could think of some other things too, but I want to be clear, I wouldn't threaten anybody ever. That's stupid. You know, don't threaten me, but I remember a student told me once a man had approached him and he almost ran him over, and the guy got out of his car and told him he was going to kick his ass, and the student just went into relax ready and calmly told him that would be a bad idea. I thought that was a pretty clever response, because that could mean a lot of things. And I asked him, I said, what'd the guy do? He said, he just kind of looked at me a moment and he got back in his car and he left. So, you know, would be a bad idea for a lot of reasons. I know the student, the thing he was thinking was, it's going to be a bad idea. It's going to make your day horrible and you're going to end up leaving here on a stretcher. Obviously, you don't add that part to it, but that's the kind of confidence you have behind it. But you could visualize this and play it out. Actually say the words that you want to say. So you're not saying the wrong things like, yeah, come on, let's step out there, or I'll kick your, or try that, or make my day, you know, anything like that. Don't threaten anybody. You're going to have legal problems. The other thing, too, I find about threatening somebody, when I see it, it looks weak. I can always tell the guy threatened is a little scared. You know, he's acting really tough, and I'm not saying he wouldn't fight, but I can tell there's fear there. That's why he said the things he said. So naturally there's fear there. We'll certainly convey it to the guy by threatening him. You can have all kinds of problems with that. I got a few more things I want to talk about, and we'll be done with this topic for now, but we're going to be coming back to it a lot. And that's the mirror. When you're perfecting the basic blows like Professor Steiner talked about or wrote about in the PDF in video number 1, a mirror is really helpful. And in this day and age, though, we can take it a lot further with our phones. Just set your phone up and do a video of yourself doing the technique. And then you can look at it and realize, oh, I see what my kick looks like. A mirror will do it too, but I think the camera almost works better in that case. But let's stay to the mirror, because the mirror could be simple. It's just hung in your dojo or your training hall, whatever you call it, wherever you're training. Well, you get the feedback of what you look like when you're doing the technique. I think the mirror, too, is extremely helpful for the relaxed ready position. So when you're in relaxed ready in a mirror, you see what you look like. Do you look like this? Do you look like this? You know, look, see what you look like. Practice different faces. Practice a face of fear. See it in the mirror, see what it looks like. What do you think the guy would think when he saw this? Practice a more fierce face. Practice a face when you attack and you go out and and you really put some intensity and see yourself in the mirror. Don't be shy about it. Oh, I look funny when I do that. Do it with intensity. But now, when we're visualizing the attacker, we don't want to be looking at our image in a mirror. When you look at your image in a mirror, of course you're going, okay, raise the foot, turn the hip. All right, the fist is here, oh yeah, I see that. And you're not focusing on the attacker, but you're working on something else that's very important. You're perfecting the blow. You're working on perfecting the blow. So at my level, at 8th degree black belt, when I practice, and I practice daily, I do a combination of those things, and for a number of reasons. I don't use a mirror anymore, and I think a mirror is a good idea. But what I mean is I practice with high intensity visualization, I practice with medium intensity visualization, and then I practice just working on the blows. Sometimes I just want to go back as an instructor and think about everything with a basic strike and how to do it, and just working that basic by itself. You're never too advanced to practice the basic strikes. So when you're doing your high intensity visualization, no mirror. Another important point, when you are working with a partner, if you do have a partner to work counterattacks with, you need to be really careful with visualization. And I find it best that the intensity is taken out. When I drill my students for the hour time that is an American Combato class, 1/3 basics, the next third attack combinations, the last third of the class counterattacks, Professor Steiner and myself do this visualization process. We get inside the student's mind so we can really get these techniques locked in, really high intensity, and then we go to counterattacks. And no matter how long my students have been with me, when we break for counterattacks, I almost always say something like this. All right, the time for high intensity is over now. Work with your partners and slow down and take, okay, not so much slow down, but, I take them down a notch. I have a couple of guys that get so revved up, and then they get in with their partner, and I got to go over, settle down right now. Because the problem is somebody is going to get hurt. So let's say you know something that triggers your partner. Maybe it's a word or something he's called, or something I can think of is I had a police officer in my class once, and the officer had some emotional difficulties, and which was rare. Every other officer I've ever trained, rock solid. But when we worked the counterattacks, if his training partner at all verbally intensive, he would get so anxious and I could see he's about to really go off on this guy. I had to really be careful, and that was a whole situation way back. But somebody's going to get hurt. Let's say you're working a knife stab, and your partner comes at you and says, "Come on, man, I'm really trying to stab you," or he comes at you in a random way. So when I come at my students in a random way, in other words, I pick up a rubber knife and I say, I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to come at you, and I don't expect you to do some exact move. Just show me what you would do. Well, if I start adding some real intensity, son of a slashing him, stabbing and slashing, I'm going to get hurt as the guy, because I'm going to bring something out of my partner, and he's going to accidentally land the knee kick a little bit. He's going to jab me in the eyes. So when you get into partner work, you need to either take out that emotional aspect altogether or bring it down to a low level. And teachers, you need to know what you're doing with this, or somebody will get hurt physically or psychologically. You've got to really know what you're doing. You've got to know psychologically when to push somebody, when not to push somebody. A couple other things. Professor Steiner referred in his talk in this video box of Bruce Lee, and how when Bruce Lee was injured, he visualized and practiced. This is really important to me here at age 61 with, my heart bad and my body failing. I hate to word it like that, but and tell myself that, but the fact is, I can't do what I used to be able to do. So, you know, for me to come out here and have a full out 1 hour session of techniques, I can't do it. It will hurt my body too much. But just like Professor Steiner had said, you can put the intensity in it. Sometimes I'm so hurt, but I can practice an eye stab like this, I'm really seeing it. Another trick, and you gotta be careful with this with visualization, put something on the line that's important to you. So for me, if somebody were to injure my wife or daughter, it would put me into a murderous rage against whoever did it. So sometimes when I train, if I want to go to that super high intensity level, I imagine not only is my wife with me and being threatened, she's already been hit. Somebody just punched her in the face. And my gosh, how I let that happen, or it's about to happen. Wow, that brings my intensity level up high. Mothers, you could relate with children. Imagine somebody trying to abduct your child, and they grab that child from you, and you know what was going to happen if they got him in the car. You'd never see that child again. And, well, practice now. Would you chop the throat? Of course you would. If you had a pen, would you rab it in his eye? Of course you would. You know, put something on the line, and that can bring visualization up too. Now, keep in mind, that super high intensity, you can't do it for very long. I think one last thing. I remember years ago being in a gun store here locally in Prescott, and I was looking at knives in the place. And the guy in there came over and he knew who I was. And we got talking about knives, and he said, I gotta ask you something. He said, how can you train somebody? I know you train people with knives. How can you train somebody with a knife without sparring? And I knew he was a gun enthusiast. And I said, how do you train with a gun? Well, he says, well, I mean, I go out and shoot the gun. I said, well, I have people cut things. That was really, I was just following his logic. And I said, you shoot at targets, don't you? And he said, yeah. I said, I have them use knives against targets. And it was like a light went on in his head, and he realized, well, of course. But that fits perfectly with what we're doing right now, that down the road on the videos, I don't know where we're at here, because I'm in the beginning of making them, but this could be 5 years from now. All the videos will be done. You could just go up to the last one and find the one on knife fighting. But boy, now we got the blade in the hand. That imagined attacker is going to be perfect for us to practice, see the triggers that would cause us to use a blade against somebody, and how we would be using it. Same with the firearm. So if you're just out all day in your weaver stance and shooting at targets, it's good. You're going to get some good out of that. And maybe you're even doing some point firing. That's good too, but what are you visualizing? What are you picturing? Do a lot of stuff with dry firing, and a lot of the training techniques with police these days have come a long way from the days of being on a firing line, which is certainly the way they're trained. But when you get into the SWAT teams and such, they've got a lot of more advanced drills, and those officers are pretty darn well trained with their weapons. Visualization, today's lesson.